Greetings and welcome to The Thirsty Mage, the podcast that can't help but punish ourselves over and over again with challenging video games. This week we're shining a spotlight on PS5 exclusive Returnal, a run-based third-person shooter from Housemarque. Its unique method of storytelling combined with the fact that you really don't see many AAA games in this genre make for a compelling experience that we had to carve out time for. Joining me is our UK correspondent, a man who puts the cross in cross players. It's Ben Congalton.
Hello, hello. I like that. Very nice.
How you doing?
Normally I get very, very insulted in our intro, so it's quite nice to just have a nice professional introduction. Thank you, John.
I was trying to do cross as in like you're the angry part of cross players. I don't know if that's true, if that's Dan or someone else. I don't know, but
no, you called it. It's very much Dan. I think.
Okay, yeah. I figured that stuck out to me. He's causing trouble on Twitter and stuff like that, so it had to be him, right?
Yeah, he said.
How are things? How are things in your neck of the woods right now?
All good. Yeah, we had some scorching temperatures here last week, but it's all sort of cooled down a little bit now. So I'm back to wearing a sweatshirt and socks, like a good respect.
Carrying an umbrella everywhere you go. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
right.
But yeah, all good. Glad to be here. And when you introduced the podcast as punishing yourselves over and over again, I thought, and he's back for another episode. I thought that was good.
Punishing ourselves with you as well, Ben.
Me.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean that's really what podcasting is, just punishing ourselves every week to try to get a new game done when we're playing so many other things or reviewing so many other things. I mean that's been me, right? Like I had a code for Live Alive, so I had to review that, and then we started Returnal like a little bit before that. So it's hard when you've got a deadline on something and then another game you're playing on the side and trying to juggle all of that. Not always easy, but
yeah. And then real life gets in the way as well.
Oh, what? I don't even know what that is anymore. So this is podcast life. We leave real life in the rearview mirror. Speaking of real life, if I sound funny, it's because I just came back from the dentist, and so half of my face is still completely frozen. And I guess that'll happen to you when you get 3 fillings done in one day. I didn't even know that was possible to do that much dental work in one day, but we made it happen. So yeah, no, my teeth are definitely not in the best shape, but hopefully, this will keep them on the mend or keep them from falling out. That'd be nice. But
wow. Well, look, if it helps, it's 11 o'clock at night here. I think this is the latest I've stayed up for. I don't know. 15 years. So, we'll pull each other through.
Yeah, I mean, if anything was going to keep you up at night, it was going to be Returnal, I think. Because, Ben, I'm pretty sure you beat this game on your first try. That's what it felt like to me from kind of watching you tweet about it a little bit. I know you got a thread going on Twitter of games you completed. And I think I mentioned we were doing an episode of Returnal, or we were going to start Returnal, and you started it. And then it felt like the next day, Returnal appeared in your tweet of your list of your games that you just finished, and I was like, oh my gosh, like how did the guy finish the game so fast? But we'll get to Returnal in a second. I want to know, is there anything else you've been playing lately, or anything you're looking forward to coming up soon?
Well, funnily enough, just literally before starting here tonight, I'm very much towards the end of As Dusk Falls.
Yes, okay.
Which I don't know if you've too familiar with that. But
heard of it. Is that an Xbox game? I don't know if it came to other places as well.
Yeah, I think it's an Xbox exclusive. And,
okay.
On Game Pass, obviously. And it's just a kind of narrative decision based choose your own adventure kind of thing, which I have never even had a remote interest in. But the power of Game Pass, you think, oh, I'll try it. It sounds interesting, and it's completely hooked me. Kind of,
oh, nice.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's broken down into 6 chapters or episodes, and it's kind of presented almost like a TV show. And I've been playing it like that, so just 1 episode a night. So I think I've got maybe 20 minutes left, which I'll try and finish off once we finish tonight, because it's getting to the climax of it now.
How long is each of those chapters or episodes?
About an hour for each.
Okay. That's good. Yeah. That's kind of a perfect time for something like that, honestly.
I think so. Yeah, nice and digestible, and I've played it all on my phone as well.
Awesome. Okay,
through the Game Pass app, and it's all all touch controls, and feels very much like we're living in the future now. Game
I mean,
console games.
that's like the perfect genre for that kind of, moving a game from a console to a phone space
Yeah.
where there's not a lot of action. You're not, worrying about a joystick or precise controls or anything like that. It is kind of really well suited to the phone platform there too.
Yeah, it's perfect.
If you like that, I mean, obviously there's a lot of other games in that genre too, but I what comes to mind is the Telltale games. So the Telltale they went out of business for a little while, and then I think they got revived somehow. I don't know if their newest projects have come to fruition yet, but they did the first one I remember from them was The Walking Dead. They did there's 2 or 3 sequels to it, but the original Walking Dead Telltale game was divided into, I think, 5 chapters, and it sounds exactly like what you're describing, Ben. You're just making decisions. It's kind of like you're watching. There's a little bit of moving around the environment, picking up pieces, talking to people, but nothing. I don't think there's a lot of timing based things, other than some of your decisions are. There's a time limit on them, like maybe 15 seconds or something like that, which kind of puts a nice bit of pressure on you to make an action, maybe when you're under that stress. But yeah, the first Telltale game was really good. I know that was kind of a critically acclaimed one. So if you get a chance, that's the one I would recommend checking out after you're done with this. If this is a genre you want to continue with.
Yeah, I think it probably is. It seems to be quite nice. It's nice to play something, particularly, and we'll get to Returnal, but kind of the juxtaposition between a game like that, which is so visceral, and then something that's very hands off, and you can just almost watch 90% of it. So I think there's definitely a time and place for that in my intense gaming schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for those palate cleansers too. Where games where I like to switch genres in between. Especially something like AAA heavy, like a longer, 10 to 20 hour game. I want something smaller, that can be finished in a few hours, or under 5 or 10 hours or something, just to put everything in perspective a little bit, help you kind of refresh so that you don't get get bored of one particular style of game or anything like that. So. The Telltale, they did The Walking Dead, they did a Game of Thrones one, they did a Batman one, there's one based on a comic series, Wolf Among Us. So if any of those properties stood out to you as something like you got into those, playing the Telltale version is kind of a decent facsimile of those experiences too. So
yeah, I could imagine. I used to love Game of Thrones. Maybe last couple of seasons notwithstanding.
Yes.
But I love that. So that might be a good one to start with. But also stuff like I've got Life is Strange somewhere on the backlog.
That's a good one. Yeah. Those are fun.
A couple of others like Detroit Become Human and what's the other one? Until Dawn. Are they the same kind of thing?
Until Dawn is, it is similar. Obviously, really horror based. It's great though, especially if you can play it in a group setting, or I imagine like streaming that game would be pretty fun too. But they're all kind of the same type of genre, So I guess the one you're playing now is a lighter version, but Until Dawn they have a little bit more exploration to it as well. So but all good games though.
Nice. What about you? What have you been playing lately?
So
Live Alive and 500 other games.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of waiting for Xenoblade 3. Like, I'm really excited about this game. The reviews just came out for it, so I'm in that period of after finishing Live Alive and penning the review and everything. You've got that week to 10 days where you're kind of waiting for the next big thing, and it's hard to find something to do there. You're just kind of I guess in a little bit of a vortex or a void or something where I don't want to start something big because I have something big coming up, but what kind of smaller bite-sized games can I get into? So I ended up jumping on the review code for Azure Striker Gunvolt 3. These are some action platformer games from Inti Creates. They do the Blaster Master remake kind of series, Blaster Master Zero. They've done a bunch of these Azure Striker Gunvolt games and kind of spin-offs to it. But they've done a bunch of stuff that has that kind of retro feel, but then they HDify it. So I just finished that last night. I'm kind of in the process of writing the review right now. It's fun. It's the premise is that you're not the Gunvolt character anymore, although you can use him, but you're this other character, Kieran, and she's kind of a samurai type character. She's got a sword, and she's got these talismans that she throws, and when you throw a talisman at an enemy, it kind of marks them, and then you can do a dash attack to them, and you're kind of just flying all over the screen after you mark these enemies. So the action's pretty good. I think the visuals are just outstanding. I think Integrate is very good at kind of drilling that nostalgia hole, but also, kind of, again, making it look and feel modern too. So Azure Striker Gunvolt 3, pretty good, especially if you liked the other games. I think you'd like this one too. I don't know if you've played any of those, Ben.
No, I haven't. I remember, one of them came out quite early in the Switch's life, didn't it?
Probably the first or second one.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think there's just too many games, isn't there?
There is always too many games. Yeah, I mean they're very much in the vein of like Mega Man X, Mega Man Zero, but kind of they kind of imagine like you turn the speed up a little bit more, like 50% faster. There's a lot of, you're not spending a lot of time on the ground here or just kind of jumping and shooting. You're constantly dashing up, up to the side diagonally, like all over the place, collecting things. But the stages are meant to be speed run, it feels like. And so if you're into those kind of games, but you want something a little bit faster paced, this is definitely one of those, and it's pretty fun.
Yeah, well, that reminds me that we will get onto Returnal eventually, of course. But the speed running aspect, I've been playing a lot of Neon White recently.
Oh, yes, of course. Right.
Have you played that?
Everyone's playing that except me, I think. And I want to get it.
All the cool kids are playing it, Jordan. Come on.
They are. And I want to get it, if only to compete, with everybody's best times on my friend list, because it does seem like everyone I know is playing that game. So, yeah. How you liking that so far?
Yeah, brilliant. Really, I really like the aesthetic of it. It's very kind of Dreamcasty in its presentation. Oh, sure. Which is a style that I haven't seen sort of copied very much, but it's really cool and very. I mean, the story is a bit rubbish, but I almost feel like that's a deliberate,
intentional
choice to make it seem more like a Dreamcast era game. But yeah, the actual gameplay is just brilliant. It's so
right on.
Yeah, you get locked in and you just completely get in your flow state and go crazy.
And are you doing that thing where like you keep playing a stage over and over again until you get like the high, I can't remember the ranking system, but do you try to play and get the highest ranking or like the platinum or trophy or whatever it is at that point?
I'm not, if I happen to get the highest ranking, I'm happy, but you only need to get a certain amount of gold to sort of proceed to the next mission. So right. I just try and generally I'll finish and get the silver to start with. And then I'll be about a second or two away from the gold, and I'll think, okay, well, I'll go back and I'll try this one again. And it's great. It's great for that. It's actually, obviously, it's all about speed running, but you do actually have to get a certain amount of gold medals. You have to hit a certain time within, a few of the levels in order to progress to the next one. So it's
right. It's gotcha. Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to pick that up. It's on my wish list. I may not wait for a sale. I really just need another break in the part in the clouds here for non like $70 titles coming out. That I have another week free where I can get into it. But yeah, no, let's move on to Returnal. So Returnal, like I said, PS5 exclusive. After Demon's Souls, it was kind of one of the first, one of the other only PS5 exclusive games that came out for a little while. It sold over 500,000 copies in its first 3 months after launch. We don't have, so that was 2021. We don't April 2021. We don't have an updated any updated sales figures from that point. But we do know that Sony acquired the studio that made the game, Housemarque, after the release of Returnal. And I don't think you buy a studio who made a game for your console if you don't like what they're doing. So obviously Sony was happy with the results, happy with the success of Returnal. I imagine that it's the kind of game that will continue to sell well. People will be picking up PS5s as the supply constraint, gets a little bit better. And people are going to keep playing this game. Returnal is also part of the I think, gosh, I'm going to get the tiers wrong, but I'm on PS Premium, which is the highest PS Plus subscription service that they have now. I think it's available to the middle tier, which is extra. So that's where I played it. Actually, I played it on. I don't have a physical copy of the game, but I did play it through the PS Plus service, and so that was me. I just downloaded it there, so it's kind of easy. So if you do have I think it's extra and above tier, you can grab Returnal, give it a shot. I got an 85 on Metacritic, so the critical response is pretty good. But yeah, like I said, I imagine this game is going to have a longer tail, people picking this game up as more PS5s get out into the wild. Ben, why don't you start by telling us what exactly is Returnal? How would you describe it? What are you doing in this game?
Wow. It's actually a tough one to define. I think it doesn't really fit into one neat little genre category, but in a way, there's two halves to it. So on the surface, it is a very kind of atmospheric third-person shooter with a run-based one of those. So you're going out, you're trying to progress as far as you can until the point where you die, and then you get sent back to the beginning. What's clever about it is that then ties into the narrative, and the narrative is kind of fed to you through these logs that you stumble across, where audio logs, which ends up being, and this isn't a spoiler because this is very early on in the game and in all their marketing, but you basically find your own body from past instances of yourself, and you play the audio log, and it gives you a little kind of inkling into what's going on in this crazy world. But I mean, 80% of the game is you're running around a kind of a very hostile planet. You're picking up guns. You're trying to survive, taking down enemies, upgrading your weapons, and as I said, trying to progress through. I think there's 6 biomes in total to get to the end. There's that, but there's also a very strange sci-fi, almost like psychological horror vibe to it, and storyline. I mean, as I said, I've just waffled there for 2 minutes, but it's quite a hard one to pin down, I would say. You can't just say, oh, it's a roguelike, because I think that tells a very, very tiny part of the story, doesn't it?
I mean, that's why I'm trying to get away personally from using roguelike and roguelite. I think those monikers, they're kind of loaded terms now, and I there's so many different games that do things differently that kind of putting them into those categories it's helpful in a way, but it's also limiting, and I just don't love that. I'd rather say run based, because it's a game that you play over and over again. It's not linear, right? Like the way you acquire the story, the way everyone progresses through the game totally differently. No one's gonna have the same experience playing Returnal as someone else. And I think a run based moniker on something like this, I think it's just a little lighter, a little less restrictive. And we just know that once you die, you go back to the beginning and you try to go as far as you can again. And it's kind of as simple as that. But you're right that Returnal is a hard one to define, because we don't have a lot of games in this space that do the things that it does, right? The way that it tells story in kind of drips and drabs, through the audio logs, through some of the events, like there's again, we've seen this in the marketing materials, but there's a house that you run into in the first biome that eventually you get to see different scenes in that house and different things happen. When that happens to you is going to be completely different from when it happens to someone else, or I guess even your. If you just lost like a super long run, and then your next run you get the key to go into the house, like your state of mind is going to be different from someone else who has been getting a lot of story bits fed to them, and they're really interested in the story at that point. So again, everyone's experience with this game is going to be totally different. I think that's why it's worth talking about this game, and why I can understand Sony wanting to bring Housemarque into the fold. Like clearly these people have a talent for making games that are fun, with solid gameplay, solid shooting mechanics, but also just to do something that other people aren't doing. Housemarque's previous games, which I think were mostly Sony exclusive, were kind of arcade type shooters. Games where you're trying to get the highest score, pretty much. They weren't something like Returnal. Like this is very different from what they'd made before. but it does carry forward like the gameplay is king or queen, kind of that kind of idea, right? That it should be a game that feels fun to play, and I think that is something we can agree Returnal does very, very well. It is an enjoyable experience to it feels good on the controller, it feels good on the hands.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree. It's one of the best feeling games that I can think of. That it's almost like that Mario feeling where you can just play Mario, and just the act of playing it is great, regardless of what's going on. The controls feel perfect, and I think Returnal is very much like that. And it does kind of go back to Housemarque and their sort of arcade roots. That even that run-based thing that you're talking about. That's an arcadey thing. If you think about it,
yes,
that's what arcades used to be designed for us, right? Okay, well, I'll try again, and I'll put a few more coins in the machine and try and progress a bit further next time. And that's basically what Returnal is, but with such a layer of presentation and narrative put on top of it that it's almost unrecognizable.
Yeah, for sure. This being like a very early PS5 game, it seems odd to me because it feels almost like a game. It feels like a little bit of it's trying to show off, what the PS5 can do, especially stuff coming out of the controller. The haptic feedback from the game is really, really cool. It's definitely showing off that what the DualSense was kind of made for. So it has part of that element of being a showcase of the console, but it also feels just super polished. Like it feels like something that could come out in the middle or end of the PS5 lifespan. And I would totally understand this type of game arriving at that time as well. Like it seems to be just making use of the console in a way that can sometimes take developers a couple of years to figure out, like obviously, these guys probably had a development kit for a while, or, at the very least, like a team that's just adept at creating an experience like this in a hurry. I wanted to talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of the game. What did we like? What did we not like? And I'll kick this one off. I think the atmosphere is really cool. I think it does that really good job of making you feel alone and isolated, and that there's no one coming to help you. You have to rely on yourself. And even though the first biome kind of sets that up really well, like it's dark, it's a jungle, it's misty. There's kind of plants, but also mountains and what looks almost like, I don't know how to describe it, like synthetic materials as well. Like they're kind of like blocks and platforms. So it's this odd combination of nature with synthetic that is kind of maybe symptomatic or emblematic, I should say, of some sci-fi titles. It definitely feels like this could be a game set in the Alien or Aliens universe of James Cameron or something like that, or Ridley Scott. So I really like the atmosphere. I think that's a defining quality of this game, that every biome can feel different, but at the same time they all feel you are meant to feel isolated and alone, almost like a Metroid game does, where the different areas of a Metroid game, they all feel distinct, but at all times you feel kind of claustrophobic a little bit. There isn't, you can go back and forth, but there's no salvation really. You just have to keep going forward at some point.
Yeah, no, Metroid was the first game that sprung to my mind playing it, because it nails that sense of isolation completely, and the eerie, I'm getting into what I loved about it, but I think
please do.
The sound design in this game is just top notch, like absolute S tier, because it lends so much to that atmosphere that's created. Like the visuals, obviously amazing, but play this with the Pulse 3D headset, and just you're hearing just scurrying noises or screeches way ahead of you, and it's just incredible. It's one of those games where you just feel it's just so intense every moment, and a lot of it, even I would say probably the shooting part of it only takes up maybe 20%. Most of it you're just wandering around.
You're jumping around, you're exploring, you're looking at things, or you're even planning where to go next, like with the map, or should you backtrack, should you take a portal back and check out another room? Are you ready for that boss fight? You're right. I mean, the shooting and the action parts are not the majority of this game, so it's funny to call it like a third-person shooter when that is part of it, but that's not the main thing. And again, that's another reason why this game is so hard to define, because you would expect a game like this, or expect a game for Housemarque maybe, to be just dominated by shooting and destroying things, but that's not the case here.
No, but it's so clever how they've implemented the shooting as well to make effectively a bullet hell shooter in a 3-dimensional space. I can't even think of another example of that, to be honest.
The only thing I can think of is Nier Automata.
Right.
That game does that. Obviously, that your character is more melee focused, but the way the enemies shoot at you, it does have that bullet hell feeling to it. A lot of the boss fights, especially, and then of course in Nier, you also have segments that are purely vertical shooters to them, right? So they do that kind of blending a little bit. But yeah, I saw a little bit of that in Nier, and then you definitely see that here as well. Casey sent a message, when he said he couldn't make it, but he mentioned he wanted to highlight the 3D audio as well. And this is definitely a game you want to put headphones on. You want to get immersed in that experience. You want to feel like if you're kind of trying to notice everything that's going around, you're really paying attention. Like having the 3D audio and wearing headphones, can really help you find out where the enemies are. Because there are times when the enemies kind of blend in, and if they're not shooting at you, and you can't see them because they do blend into the environment, especially in that first biome. Being able to hear where they might be or know that they might be around the corner, might prevent an early death, an early end to a run.
You've reminded me of something, but I'm conscious of getting too spoilery. How far did you get into it?
Not far. So I don't mind being spoiled, because I did look ahead and see some of the other biomes just to get a sense of the visual experience. And the truth is, this is going to be a game I probably come to periodically and just see if I can push forward a little bit. I'm not desperate to finish this game, because I feel like I got enough out of the experience to enjoy it. I feel like I know what the game is, and I'll talk more about my own personal feelings a little bit later in terms of staying power and stuff. But I totally respect what this game is doing, and I understand and can see why people would love this.
Yeah,
but you go ahead.
It's well, I won't say which biome it is, but just getting back to your point about the 3D audio, there's one biome in particular that is pretty dark and dense, and you find yourself almost relying solely on audio cues to know where the enemies are coming from. Now and again you'll see a little bit of light accompanying them, but you're almost like pivoting your field of view because you hear something off to your left, but you can't actually see, so you're just almost shooting into the darkness because you just know that there's something out there.
Sure, and you hope you hit something. Hope the life meter pops up so you can see that at least. Right?
Exactly. And it's I think it does some really clever stuff in terms of creating that. Yeah, I mean it does feel like a horror game to me. Like, I don't really play a lot of horror stuff, but to me this is more than scary enough. It is creepy, and I don't. Somehow they've just nailed the whole atmosphere while still making it fun, which I think is a real compliment to them, because as we said, the gameplay in itself is fun, but then you've got this layer of like, oh, do I want to be here? But then the actual act of playing it is just great. So it's a kind of how they can kind of juggle those two things at the same time whilst also telling a compelling story, albeit a very, very confusing one.
Yeah, sure. Like it's almost impossible not to tell a confusing story in the way that the story is delivered here. It's almost it's one of those, like, you kind of piece it together yourself, and it is what you make it to be in a way.
I think so. Yeah. Certainly, having finished beating the last boss, I think it is supposed to be completely left up to interpretation. Like this whole, where Celine is, where what she's going through, what her past has been. I think you're just supposed to piece it together and make it whatever you want it to be in a way. There's a few twists along the way. Like, if you do manage to push through it, there's a few kind of things that just make you go, oh, you clever people.
I like it.
Yeah, it's really good.
That's good. Another strength, and kind of building on this idea of atmosphere, is just this constant tension that you feel. Like you always feel. I always feel like I'm in danger. Even if I don't see the red icons on the minimap indicating enemies, the idea that I could fall off a cliff, or fall into a pit of acid or lava or something like that, or that I could go into a room and it's going to have, laser beams suspended from the ceiling that are shooting at me, or there's some obstacle, and I know if I get through this, I'm going to get a really good item, a really good perk or buff or something. But the danger built into that, is it worth it, right? You're constantly evaluating whether the risk is worth the reward in this game, in terms of both, should you get out of cover to take a few more shots of your weapon? Should you wait for your secondary weapon to finish charging and then use that? And then you have the contrast of that tension with the boss fight tension, where it's an arena. It's an arena-based combat, right? There is nowhere to run at that point, when you're fighting those end biome bosses, it is you versus them. There is no running. You now it's a different type of tension. It's can you perform? Can you dodge? Can you press the buttons at the right timing? Can you take shots at the right timing? Did you bring the right weapon? Did you prepare enough for where you are now? And I think that the balance between those different types of experiences, or the different types of tense moments that the game puts you in, is, again, that's really clever. That's good game design as well. That you're being thrown off balance in a good way by how you have to juggle your kind of mental faculties, or your even your hand-eye coordination, whatever. Like, it's very different fighting the basic enemies, fighting the towers, avoiding the traps, versus the really one-on-one combat focus of the boss fights.
Yeah, you're right. It is that you have to stay sharp the whole game. You can't switch off at all, I find. Even, I mean, especially the bosses. I even found I was better off playing this during the daytime, when I was...
me too. Yeah, I was the exact same.
Switched on, full of caffeine. Like, I can do this. And I had a few nights where I was banging my head against a brick wall against, a particular boss. And then it's one of those classic gamer things where you get up the next day, think, okay, I'll try it one more time now. And then you just do it first time. And there's, this game is one of those where I think you just need to be like 2 inches away from your monitor and completely locked into what's going on. But yeah, I mean, if we can move on to another great thing, those bosses that you mentioned.
Yes, sure.
Every single one of them was just epic in the true sense, not in the sense that everyone says, oh, that's epic. Like, it felt epic. And there's one in particular, I think it's the boss of Biome 3, possibly, called Nemesis. And it will stick in my mind forever. Like, it was up there with some of the best Elden Ring bosses for me, in terms of you just feel like, wow, the sheer scale of this, it feels like this could be a last boss in any other game. But the fact it's just halfway through this game just really shows how big and mad some of the bosses are. But that one in particular sticks out for me. And also, I mean, the first one, Frike, I think he is, or he or she or it, I'm not even sure. But
gosh knows.
That they just, I think that's, I mean, I know, Alex from the Cross Players didn't get past Frike.
Right.
He just found it too frustrating to.
And I could totally understand that, right?
Yeah,
it is that test like you get at the beginning of a Dark Souls game, Demon Souls, Elden Ring. It's that test of like whether you want to keep pushing against it, or whether you're just like, maybe this isn't for me. And I think that's fine. I think it's fine to have games where there is a section where you can kind of be gated off from the rest of it. And just because it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder than this, right? So if you're not able to do this one, that's okay. Like, I think that's fine. And Frike does a good job of really being that test of, can you put it together? Can you figure out what this game is asking you to do? I liked that fight a lot, and getting through it. I mean, again, it's that same feeling of beating an Elden Ring boss. You're just on top of the world. You're on cloud 9 when you take it down, and nothing's better than that in video games. Yeah,
and then when you realize you don't ever have to do it again, that's a great feeling.
Yeah, very true, very true.
When I first realized, I can just skip to the next biome now. I don't have to fight. Like, that's great. But I think you're right. Like the From Software comparison, in terms of, something like Bloodborne, where it chucks you in to a very hard area to start with, puts you up against some really tough bosses. And it is almost like you will need to get through tougher tests than this. So if you can't do this bit, you're probably not going to get on with the rest of the game. And I think I mean, I think we should be kind of crediting Sony, and we were talking about this on Crosscast a couple of weeks ago about Death Stranding,
Sure.
how Sony can fund these pretty niche games, really, that don't fit any kind of expectations. Obviously, I think they come under fire for doing these kind of these third person depressed dad walking around an apocalypse kind of games. But really, I mean, in terms of Death Stranding and certainly Returnal, these are ambitious niche games. I mean, you can tell it from I mean, 500,000 copies sold in the first few months. I mean, it might be over 1 million now, but I know
and of a new IP, of a console that had just launched and was supply constrained, it's impressive, no matter how you slice it.
Is. But something they will have known something like this is not going to appeal to everyone, and it's going to have quite I'm sure if we looked at the trophy list, we'd see, a pretty massive drop off in people getting the sort of, biome 2, biome 3 trophies, because it is hard, and there's no getting around that. It's a really, really challenging game, and to take the kick in the teeth of going right back to the start every time with, let's be honest, pretty, minimal carryover from run to run, that is hard, and you have to really enjoy the act of playing the game to push through that, I think. But
that's me. That I'm just at a place where with roguelikes, roguelites, run-based games, whatever, I only have so much patience for them now, and it's just the patience of a human being, considering all the other things happening in your life. Like you have your kids to deal with, you have your work, you have your hobbies, your friends, family, everything. You only have so much patience to give, and so when your video game hobby time also requires a certain amount of patience. And you have to be able to cope with that feeling of defeat and going back to the beginning. That can weigh on you, right? And I think that's part of my, not frustration, but it's something that will keep me from continuing to play Returnal forever, or to eventually I will have to stop. And I think I have kind of stopped a little bit, or at the point where I'm going to return to it only periodically. I'm not going to keep playing it for hours and hours and days on end. I just can't, because I don't have the heart for that, or I don't have the mental capacity for that failure, the state that it induces so many times. And I think that's fine. Again, I've enjoyed my time with it. I think I can say this is a really good game. I can understand why it's an 85 on Metacritic, and why some people have enjoyed it, and that it's an impressive debut on PS5 for Housemarque, and why Sony would invest in this company. But this is not a game for everybody. It is unique. It is different. It is meant to be. It's meant to be challenging, almost in an off-putting way. Like, clearly they didn't develop this for a wide audience. Like, you develop a game that you want to make for you and for a specific group of people that can get into something like this, and that's fine. Like, we have to understand that not every game is made for everybody. Returnal doesn't have difficulty settings. It doesn't have an option where you can just turn on progression so that everything you carry over, you can carry over everything to the next run. It doesn't have that, but that's just not in its DNA, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Although it's strange, isn't it, for such a modern game in so many respects, visually, sonically, it feels so modern. And then, as you said, in the DualSense implementation, for a modern game like that to not embrace some of those concessions does feel a little bit strange in a way that they haven't put in a god mode like you would get in something like Hades. Exactly. Or Celeste even had amazing options for stuff like that.
Yeah, it was great.
And it's a strange choice, but at the same time, in the same way that we kind of hold From Software up on this sort of pedestal, I think we have to do the same with Housemarque as well.
Yes.
Okay, sure. You've clearly had this vision, and you have executed it absolutely perfectly. And yes, it's going to alienate a lot of the audience, but you've stuck to your guns and you've made a masterpiece. and it is. I mean, over here we have the BAFTA Game Awards. This won our Game of the Year last year in 2021.
Oh, okay, yeah, right.
So it's clearly resonating, if not with a kind of a mass audience, at least it's resonating with gaming journalists and critics. But I think it's an incredible game. I don't know what I would sort of change about it, really.
If we want to call video games art, if we want to dare to make such an assertion, we have to allow the people creating them the freedom to make what they want to make and what their vision, to fulfill their vision, right? And if their vision doesn't involve making the game completely accessible and approachable for everybody, I can't fault them. Like, it might not be what I want or how I would make a game, but I just think that if you tell creators what to do, then you don't get Returnals, you don't get Elden Rings, right? You get something else, and you would really take away from these masterpieces, these amazing creations that people have come up with that I could never dream of making. I don't want to restrict talented people who have brilliant ideas from making what they believe in, and so that's kind of where I'm at with a game like this. It'd be really cool if they had options to allow me, to feel better about finishing the game. I personally would like that, but I wouldn't ask them to do that, because then Returnal wouldn't be Returnal anymore. It'd be something else, and it might affect other people's experiences who did find it a masterpiece or who did consider it an award-winning game. Like, I don't want that to change.
Yeah. And also, look, there's ways to break games as well, right? There's
for sure.
Elden Ring is another. We have to go back to that, but I played a mage build, and all my friends were taking mocking me the whole time.
So
because it's basically because it's easy mode.
It is, yeah.
But it's still very, very hard.
Sure, exactly. It's easy mode within an incredibly, incredibly difficult game that a lot of people will still have this kind of a challenge with, no matter what.
Yeah. So I felt no shame in that, and I think there's games are there. Once you've paid for that art, it's yours, and you can bend and shape it to your will to get whatever enjoyment you want out of it.
Again, the mage class is built into that game. It's not like there's no magic. It's not like there aren't weapons or ways of progressing in that game that are everything you can do in there is built into it. Or
exactly.
On the other side, there are mods for games, if you're playing on PC, like that change games entirely to make them, again, approachable for other people. And that's great too. Yep. Like if that's an option, if you can go and take it. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the difficulty in games thing, because that's a huge other topip, and it takes hours to unpack and everything. But yeah, back to Returnal. Is there anything, Ben, here that you think is a weakness of the game, something that you would change, or that that could be tweaked a little bit to improve or increase your enjoyment with it?
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to one of your original points about, is it unfair to label this as a rogue light? I guess. Because I think if we are calling it that, and a lot of people are, then I think it's a terrible one of those.
Sure,
it is. I almost think it's doing the game a disservice to label it as that, because it doesn't do that very well. I don't think my expectations of playing a roguelike are, I'm going to get some great synergies going here. I'm going to find this item which pairs really nicely with that ability, and then I'm just going to suddenly become really overpowered, and that will get me through the rest of this run. You're doing something like Binding of Isaac or Slay the Spire is a great example of that.
Sure.
You just find, this card pairs really nicely with this card. Now it's made me, really, really powerful. I never felt like that at all playing Returnal. It was like, okay, well, I've got this cool gun, and I think my favorite gun was Electro Pylon something or other, which basically just puts out this red lightning that jumps between enemies, and they gradually die, and that was like amazing.
That sounds awesome.
Have to do much, but that was it. It was like, okay, this is a cool gun, and yes, I can unlock some abilities for it, but it never felt like I was putting a great build together like you would normally get in a roguelike. So I kind of missed that satisfaction of it. It just felt like, here's a random assortment of items. Oh, and you can buy a couple of health items as well. Unlock a few other things that will help you on your way. But none of it kind of came together in the way that I would hope it would, if that makes sense to you.
Sure. No, I get that. I think we share that kind of maybe criticism or light critique of the game. I'll add to that. I think that the economy of the game is a little bit punishing. The way that you spend ether and the orblets, or the what are the yellow fragments are called, the basic currency of the game. Whenever you get to a shop, I feel like you can kind of maybe buy one thing and that's it. And I guess in part of, maybe making the game more approachable could be just tweaking the economy. Sometimes that's enough to allow players to get a little bit further, or to make the game a little bit easier. I just felt like whenever I get to a shop, I either didn't have enough money, or the decision to what to buy wasn't very clear. Like in terms of how the buffs would work, it's this feature improves by 10%, but only under this condition. It's one of those games where sometimes the adjustments or improvements are very incremental, and I prefer when you get an upgrade that feels different, or just makes you feel more powerful. That feeling of feeling really powerful hasn't happened for me in this game, and I don't know. Maybe it doesn't ever. Again, that could be part of the design. That's fine, but I like that in a run-based game, or any kind of game, where there's a moment where I feel like a god. Like I feel like something has happened. I figured something out. I picked up something, and even if it doesn't last, but for some time period, I feel super powered, and I haven't had that feeling in Returnal. And maybe I haven't played it enough to get there, or maybe Ben, you can tell me if you ever felt like that playing this game. But
yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there's probably been a few times where I've picked up a gun that I really like. I know I've got a power that will bring me back to life the first time that I die.
Yes,
or when I beat the final boss, I had something that would, if I died, it would bring me back to life, but then it would give me 2 malfunctions.
Right, sure. Okay.
So obviously that's a really risky thing to take on.
Yes,
but I was like, okay, well, I'm at the final boss now. I can probably ride out whatever these malfunctions are if it means an extra chance of life. And that ended up being the thing that pushed me through.
Oh, awesome.
It
always, that was it.
It feels like you're always just about scraping by,
yes,
by
totally.
the skin of your teeth, rather than, like in going back to that Metroid comparison, by the end of Metroid, you are just kicking ass all over the shop.
Totally. Yes, for sure.
And it's a fantastic feeling. But yeah, in this, everything always feels on a knife edge. You're constantly weighing up, do I want to take on that malfunction because it's got this buff, but then it also does that, negative effect. And there is always that kind of, I don't know what I should be doing really, because none of this feels really great. None of it is like perfectly, amazing. This is just all good stuff. There's always some kind of flip side to every decision.
Yeah, there seems like there's a trade-off for almost everything that you acquire, right? Like you have to, accept a risk or accept a punishment for taking a buff. And so, it's almost taking that risk reward a little too far, I guess. Like if I pick up an item in a run-based game, like I'd love for that item to just help me for the rest of my run, as opposed to like, I have to think about what's the consequence of this. And then anytime I do anything else, am I going to activate that trap card? Like that's what I'm worried about the whole time, is like whether something I've already taken is going to affect the next thing I take. As opposed to just kind of stacking things on top of each other. I reviewed a game a few months ago called Revita. Revita is a run-based game, and it's very much one of those like you just keep stacking buffs and buffs and buffs on top of each other, and building up your life meter and all those kind of things, and you get stronger and stronger. And so you're capable of finishing off that final boss because of all the decisions you've made along the way. And it's not so much about your skill at the game, but more, did you find the right things? Did you make the right decision? Did you also display some skill along the way? But it's that combination of those different factors. Returnal feels like it's just your skill the whole time. It's an emphasis on your skill and your decision making over like, getting good buffs, getting good items, maybe exploring a little bit more or taking that risk like that. I guess it's just harder to feel prepared for a situation. It strictly feels more like a test of your skill, especially during those boss fights. When you get in there, it's you versus the boss, and can you do it or you can't,
Yeah, no, that's true. And again, I guess that's the arcade roots again, right? Of Housemarque. It's ultimately it comes down to skill and whether you and a little bit of luck as well,
for sure.
For sure. But it's.
Maybe speaking of those arcade roots again, we'll go to the last kind of note before a last call. But I want to know if you think the run-based experiment with Returnal works. Do you think that we will see other games, experiment with this style after Returnal's success? Like, again, that we kind of noted that there aren't a lot of games like this in the $60, $70, $80 tier of games, just because it's such a big risk. You're putting so much budget behind a game like this that is maybe not going to resonate with everybody because of its style, right? Like, people can get frustrated. And we did see that, upon Returnal's launch, like, there were people buying the game that were frustrated by the nature of it. And you understand that, they're taking a risk, but you're taking a risk with a lot more money. So, whether other companies want to do that, I don't know. But do you think that the experiment works? Do you think we'll see more of this going forward? What are your predictions there?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I feel like, in a way, this, from my understanding of the development of this game, it was very tricky. And I think there's something, I read an interview where they said, about half the time it was completely unplayable.
Yes, I read that too.
They were like wrestling with this beast of a game. So I'm not saying they're an easy thing to produce, but I do think one thing with run-based games is you can almost do more with a bit less content. So if you make it hard enough, then you can get away with having what would be a very short game if you could just play through it in one go, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Obviously, Returnal, if you just played it start to finish, you'd probably finish it in 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, sure.
If it wasn't so hard. So it almost gives this kind of like... It almost falsely prolongs the experience, making it into a run-based game. So I don't know. I don't know if, like, in terms of development costs and development time, maybe companies will look at it and go, okay, well, we could probably churn this out in a year, or we could make a 60, 80-hour open world game in 5 years.
Right, with and then DLC and do microtransactions.
Yeah.
Like, you just feel like there are other ways that the larger studios are trying to get people's money, and it's not with an experience that theoretically could be finished, like you said, in a few hours or a handful of hours.
So I think that might come into it. But in terms of it as a genre becoming kind of mainstream, that is difficult to imagine, because
that seems like a stretch, doesn't it? It seems like that would be asking a lot to see a lot more games like this. I don't know. But I'd love to see other studios try their hand at this type of game. Hopefully Returnal could be, the start of something, the start of a new genre, or where we see run-based games that have a budget like this, that look and feel the way Returnal does. I think that'd be really cool. You just look at the way the AAA space is going, though, and it just doesn't feel like that's likely. They are pivoting towards other types of experiences.
Yeah, no, it's true. And in a way, though, I think that's quite a romantic thing to have, if we just ended up with just Returnal as the sole, example of this sort of thing.
You promised me there'd be no romance talk on this podcast. You promised me before we started recording.
Always bring the romance.
You just had to get sappy on me. Okay.
It's the effect you have on me. No, I just think it's quite a nice... I think this this game is destined to go down as a cult classic.
Yes.
It's never going to be your absolute blockbuster. This is one of the greatest games of all time. But I think in 10, 15, 20 years' time, we'll be looking back and going, that was amazing. That was a complete outlier in, a world of Call of Duties and FIFAs. And that really was, an example of a big publisher just going, yeah, let's make some art. Let's put that out. Let's push the boundaries a little bit. But unfortunately, I can't imagine. I think people will take a lot of influences from Returnal in terms of presentation. And certainly that the gunplay in it is fantastic, and that 3D bullet hell stuff worked really well. So I think we'll see some of that. But in terms of run-based AAA, I remain skeptical.
Yeah, I think we're in the same boat here, and I think one of the few opportunities you have for this is when you get the beginning of a console where there's a little bit more experimentation. I was going to say, but also you get companies like Sony wanting to pad out their library with some unique titles. So if Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo can say, hey, like we have the platformers, we have the shooting games, we have the sports titles. But let's do something unique. Let's throw some money at a unique project that we think can, be a critical success and maybe get a segment of people to buy the console that wouldn't have bought it otherwise. Like that feels like what Returnal could have done for the PS5. That people were going to want to buy this anyways, but maybe years and years from now, people are on the fence. There's been a price drop. Should I get a PS5? Should I get a Series X? Well, Returnal's only on PlayStation. Although funny enough, I do expect it to come to PC at some point, because Sony and Sony's doing that now, right? So
I think something came out a couple of days ago, which someone's
I think that's right.
Steam Deck certified now, or something like that.
Yes, that's it. It was good. It was good timing for when we were recording, planning to record the podcast.
So topical. We've got our finger on the pulse. We know what we're doing.
As always, yeah. Now we just need actual Steam Decks, and we'll be set. You don't have a Steam Deck, do you, Ben? I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but.
No, I cancelled my pre-order.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, a moment of clarity or stupidity, depending on your perspective.
Yeah, I had a friend asked me if I wanted to buy one, but I'm kind of waiting to see what the later Steam Decks will look like. Like it feels kind of still at that stage of people figuring out what the platform can do. But I do like what it does. Like it does feel like a PC based Switch, but with a lot more bells and whistles, a lot more things you can do. And so at some point I would see myself investing, but maybe not like I need another platform. I literally have a Series S Xbox still in the box. I haven't even opened yet. Like that's where I'm at. That's where my backlog is at. I have a console that I bought a couple months ago. I haven't even opened yet. So
I can compete with that.
This is the life. This is the life I'm living over here. Review Central over here. But I don't know that we'll see more games like this, but my hope is that some other people will take a risk and say like, hey, Returnal worked. Like maybe we can take risks too. Like just to see more risks rather than more sequels or more familiar titles. We'll see AAA games in spaces we haven't seen before, like we did with Returnal. So my hope is that we will see some type of a reaction to this, whether it's more games like this or just more experimentation. I think that would be welcome. So that's kind of where my more pragmatic, realistic prediction, I guess, leans, is just more, maybe a little bit more experimentation going forward, hopefully.
Yeah.
But let's we're just about in an hour here, so let's get to the last call. So kind of in that vein of more run-based games, what would a Returnal sequel look like? If you knew Housemarque was going to do Returnal 2, what do you want that game to be? What could it look like? Or do we just say, hey, no, we don't want another Returnal? What is Housemarque going to do next with this obvious pedigree that they have? And now with a little bit more Sony backing as well.
Wow. I personally don't think they would do a Returnal sequel. I think this will remain a one-off because... not necessarily because of anything that happens in the game, because it's tied up in a neat little bow or anything.
I should have said, spoiler alert, Ben gives away this the ending of Returnal by saying there's no sequel. Sorry everybody. We'll edit this out in post, no doubt. But
no, I find it very hard to imagine that they would do a sequel to this game, I think they will move on to something even more ambitious, possibly, now that they've got the full backing of Sony and they are a first-party studio now. Because that happened after the fact, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Not shortly after the release of Returnal 2,
So I can't envisage one. If they were to do one, though, God knows what they would do. Obviously,
what would you like them to do, Ben? If you're the head of Housemarque now, what do you want to do with all this talented development pool?
I think they've done it with the DLC. They've brought a multiplayer option. They've brought a proper roguelike mode, which I haven't actually dabbled in, but that Tower of Sisyphus, I think it's called, where I know Casey was really enjoying playing through that because it is just that wave based, trying to get to the next level, trying to get as far as you can without any of the other distractions almost. So it's more of a pure run-based experience. So
yeah, right.
I think they've done what I would have wanted to see from a sequel. So give me some online multiplayer, make me, help me share the load of this ridiculously difficult game with a friend.
Sure.
So I think they've pushed it. And in terms of the story, I mean, I'd love to get a bit more clarity on what the hell happened. But I just don't think. I think it is art, and I think it is completely done in isolation, and they've got absolutely no intention of making a second one. And I'm going to look like an absolute idiot if they ever do.
No, I appreciate you drawing a line in the sand, and I think that's fair. Like a game like this doesn't feel like it needs a sequel. I don't need to play a lot of this game to realize that I think they've accomplished what they wanted to do with it. The post-launch content, and you just see the reception to a game like this, and then the fact that now they are in Sony's house, officially. Like they have so much more at their disposal to create something. It doesn't have to. In a way, the run-based constraint here is maybe a budgetary one as well. They can't build this entire huge open world because they didn't have the finances, the resources to do that. But now they do. So why not take people that are obviously very good at creating fun gameplay, especially shooting gameplay. And I really like games. I think of a game like Destiny 2, where what really stood out to me above anything else in that game was just how fun the shooting felt in that game. Like it really is top notch, Yep. And I can understand why Destiny 2 became like this big live service game and they're still adding on to it because it feels amazing to play. And, obviously there's a lot of trappings that keep people staying with it. But if the base and the foundation weren't good, you wouldn't keep building, you wouldn't keep iterating on a game like that with new content constantly coming out. So I'd like to see them, maybe something in the vein of something like Halo, maybe not so big, not so ambitious, but, keep it futuristic, keep it sci-fi, maybe have it a little bit more open, as opposed to the kind of narrow corridor spaces and, clearly defined or delineated environments of Returnal, but open it up a little bit, keep it a third-person shooter. They're obviously very good at that. And I don't want to take them away from something that they've done very well in. And, the development of, Returnal, I'm sure they've learned a lot of lessons from that. So, bring those forward to the next game. Doesn't have to be a sequel, but, third person futuristic shooter. Let's see them experiment or branch out a little bit with storytelling. Like maybe something less cryptic, something more obvious. Something more in your face. You can do more voice acting, more characters. But just something on a larger scale now that they have that backing, but retaining the perspective and some of the gameplay, especially the shooting gameplay of Returnal. That's what I'm hoping for their next project.
So you want them to sell out, basically?
I do. Yeah, just become like everybody else.
Exactly. Just let's homogenize the whole game. No, I know.
Halo, Sony's Halo. I'm predicting it right now. They're going to be Sony's Halo. Okay.
But they'll release it finished rather than Halo Infinite.
Oh yeah, they're not 343 Studios, okay?
No. One thing that they could, this is probably a good halfway house is a spiritual sequel. Spirituals, I could imagine that. So not straight up Returnal 2, but maybe something set in the same universe.
I love that concept of things set in the same universe as something else. Like we're seeing more and more of that. I think it's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, I like it, and almost if not even that, but like maybe the Team Eco games where they all have this kind of same DNA that, you know, from Eco to Shadow of the Colossus to The Last Guardian, you know, they feel like sequels to one another.
Yes,
but they're not. They're not in the classic sense. Whereas number 1, number 2, number 3, they're just, you know, they've taken their learnings from this game and they've increased the scale, increased the ambition, and they've, you know, but it's still art. They're still hanging on to their principles, and it'd be great to imagine Housemarque doing the same.
Yeah, that just it reminds me a little bit of Sea of Stars. So Sea of Stars is set in the same world as the Messenger, right? The Messenger. And so you're going from these are completely different games, right? Like an action platformer to a turn-based RPG. But set in the same universe allows you like some connections. There's some threads between the games, and I like that. So maybe a game set in Returnal's universe that's a totally different style of game, like a puzzle game, a platformer. I don't care, but just some connective tissue there, I think is a neat thing that we're seeing a little bit more of, almost popularized by something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, where people like to see these connections and relationships between things rather than just invent them themselves. Oh, it actually is set in the same universe. I can see these clues, I can see these details. And it feels like you are kind of joining an expanding story or a conversation that just keeps going. Like it's engaging, you know, like I like that kind of stuff. So
how about a prequel, but it's a more of a Resogun style shooter, and it's Celine before she crash lands onto the planet and she's actually, you know, in her ship.
Or a flight simulator where she's learning to pilot her ship so she doesn't crash on the planet, and so you can actually you can prevent Returnal from even happening. There'd be no Returnal. if you win the prequel, if you get to the end of the prequel, Returnal doesn't even happen. There you go. We'll retcon the whole game. I think it'll take us to the end of our Returnal discussion. Ben, you know what's going on with you? I know obviously, you know, cross players and cross casts and things like that. What podcasts can people find you on regularly? What kind of stuff would you like to plug? Where can people find your stuff?
Sure. I mean, all your podcast feeds. If you look for the cross players, then you'll see our feed, which is actually, we've got 3 main podcasts now that we put out. So we've got Crosscast is our kind of weekly sort of magazine show almost, where we do different segments and cover all platforms. So that comes out every Friday. And I'm generally on that along with my friends, and we put out also we've got an exclusive a PlayStation podcast as well called Cross Button, and we've also got X Players, which is our Xbox podcast. And the irony is that we started off as a Switch podcast, and we don't have a Switch podcast anymore. So watch this space. One day we'll get that together. But so we do those 2 shows bi-weekly, and then we do Crosscast every week.
Perfect. Right on.
And it's a lot of fun. So if you like your video game coverage with a very distinctively British sense of humor, then give us a listen.
With people complaining about high temperatures and sunshine for the one week of the year that they get it, that's where you can go for that kind of content, right?
Yep.
I'll plug a couple things. So I was saying to Ben earlier that I just kind of started working on my Azure Striker Gunvolt 3 review, so that'll be on NWR either today or tomorrow. You can check that out. I'm really excited to get into Xenoblade 3. That comes out on Friday. We gave it a 9 out of 10. I think it's sitting around an 89 on Metacritic, so people are obviously loving that game. Ben, are you or any other cross players looking to get into Xenoblade?
I probably won't, because I'm about halfway through the first Xenoblade game. Okay, so maybe in, I don't know, 30 years time, I'll get around to Xenoblade 3. But I mean, it looks amazing, and I'm very tempted to skip past the rest of 1 and 2 and Torna and just get straight to 3. But I think I'll be patient and I'll be sensible.
Well, look at you being a good boy like that. Yeah, we have to act like adults once in a while, you know. But yeah, I think that'll do us for this episode. So check out Ben and the Cross Players, wherever your podcasts are found. You can find where the Thirsty Mage podcast, wherever podcasts are found as well. Leave us a review. Leave us a comment. Let us know how you like the show. You can check out my stuff on NintendoWorldReport.com. You can find me on Twitter at Wristman64. Ben, if we wanted to find you on Twitter, where could we do that?
Yeah, you can find me at Benji Kong on Twitter.
Yep, right on. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back at you next week. I think we are at some point going to do a Live Alive spoiler cast. Paige, myself, and maybe someone else. That's coming down the pipe. I'm not sure what next week is going to look like. Maybe some impressions of Xenoblade 3, because I know myself, David, and Casey will all be getting it. I think Paige might be as well. So stay tuned for thoughts on that. But hope everyone has a good evening, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye for now.
Bye.